welcome to Newcastle Helix presents. This is BrainFood. And so this will stop in a second. You're going to clap aloud. I'm going to force you. I'm going to force you. Richard wants the beers. He's already pointed out it's 11 o'clock. Thank you. So BrainFood. BrainFood is a session that we are going to be running throughout the year. This is the very first. So we are delighted that you are here. This is your very first time here at Newcastle Helix. This is what's called an innovation hub. So there are 9 buildings, more to come. We're in one of them. This is the core. Tony is a building manager. There he is. Tony's a building manager, so any problems go to him. And we have so many wonderful people on site who are working in science, in tech, in space, in digital. And beyond that as well, we've got 2 national innovation centres here for ageing and for data as well. And then you enter the other organisations and then see representatives here from, we've got the NHS, we've got Bank of England, and the list goes on. I think this place is pretty unique in terms of the people who are on site, but a major thing has been their open arms to build this into a community. So I am Charlie Charlton. I am the Community Engagement Manager here on site. And what I've got is like 20 years of journalism, and my idea is just to go into these buildings and uncover all these stories, either from the organisations or the people. And you've all been very, very good at that so far. On top of that, I'm joined by this man behind the camera, Chris Taylor, who is a filmmaker extraordinaire. And what we do is we tell these stories either at events like this or on film. And then these films will then be shown on our social media channels. So you've got LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Insta, all of that. Today is not being shown live. We're not streaming it, but it will be recorded so you can share it afterwards with your friends. So the point of today is to bring everybody together. We were asked by the Helix community to have free food. You got it. Free drink. Hot. You got it. And a great conversation with new and old friends. You've definitely got that. So thank you very much to so far. So the deal is creating this kind of safe space. I know that's a phrase that's bandied around, but the idea is there is no hierarchy. There are no stupid questions because we all have expertise in different areas. So each of our events is along a different theme. Welcome, come on in. And this one is Shared Planet. So Newcastle Helix was beautifully described by one of your colleagues, I believe, Tim Rippon. So let me get this right. A small acorn that'll grow into a great oak, because it's going to be the starting point for the true transition to net zero for the whole of the city. We are up against it. Let's be honest. It's an enormous challenge, the climate crisis. So we're going to find out about the latest innovations for tackling emissions and greenhouse gases. But it couldn't be a lot of facts and figures, so we're going to try and decant them and make them a little bit more accessible. There's a very important one, which is in the northeast. We have been taking action. Between 2005 and 2020, we reduced our CO2 output by 58%. But there's a lot more to be done. We want our families to live in a greener, fairer, more sustainable world in terms of jobs, as well as the environment. So what are the real life challenges for individuals and for companies? What are the real life opportunities, particularly for the Northeast, because we're very specific in terms of our geography, and what good green jobs could be out there for you, for your families? And also, can we bring down energy bill? We will get to the root of all of this today. And we're going to be talking about this decarbonisation of 3 things. So we'll be talking about power, we'll be talking about buildings, and we'll be talking about vehicles. And we're going to take a look at them one by one because they're all kind of interlinked, can get a bit complex. And we've got a stream of amazing experts over here who are going to come and have these fireside chats. But also in the audience, I know there are many more innovators and researchers, academics, and the public. And the public, of course, is the key to this. Communicating these ideas are the only way that we can actually make this real change. So how do you get involved? You know the deal. Well, all of our events, it's a full interactive conversation, courtesy of the famous mic ball. So get ready to catch the Richard. Throw it to this guy here. Dreadful catch. There we go. Catch the mic ball. There's a little mic at the top, isn't there, Richard?
Yep, there it is.
There it is. Beautiful. Okay, throw it back to Katie. Throw it to Katie, definitely. In the ceiling. That's what do. So we're going to have that bouncing around. Instead of it being, a formal speech and then the Q&A, we just roll with it the whole time. So should we get started? Please, can you welcome our very first expert? It is Mr. Glenn Wallace. So, Glenn Wallace is going to talk about power generation. You're with Equans Urban Energy. But the main thing is people will know you because of that giant building that's on site with the giant chimney that I know has a posher name than that, Kirk. Can you tell us about the District Energy Centre?
So we built a district energy centre to serve Helix in about 2017. It was commissioned and finished 2019. It's been operational ever since, so it provides heating, cooling and electricity for the scheme, or the site, sorry.
So that's just so the building was on here.
That was at the minute, yeah, but we are being quite ambitious. So what we found is that within kind of these developments and these buildings, the design was often kind of overrated. So there's capacity within the energy centre to spread out further within the city and then help other key stakeholders.
So you've already done a bit of that. The Discovery Museum just down the road.
We did. So BrainFood House is a really interesting building for a lot of different reasons. But it's a grade listed building with old infrastructure. So we took the heat network there just to prove that that could be done. Thank you very much.
So it can be done there, but it could be expanded.
It can be done there, it can be done anywhere.
Now, I've been to the District Energy Centre and we've been on the roof and it feels fabulous. And for me as a complete layperson being inside, it's like a powerhouse. Explain what's going on in there.
It is a power station. I think that's the easiest way in which we look at it. But technology and design has moved on so much in kind of the last 20, 30 years that what we think, and a lot of people in here can look around have been in there with us within the energy centre. Sometimes you'll see me in a pair of Crocs, kind of with shorts, just walking around, kind of minding my business. But it's all inherently safe by design now, and things are in nice, neat packages, and we get into a point where we can kind of interact with people. So it is a power station. We are producing electricity, we are producing heat, we are producing cooling. It is at a large scale, big enough to supply a 23-acre site, and then other areas within kind of the city. It's a little bit more relaxed, but it kind of is. We're now in the whole purpose of it for Helix was always this community engagement, that we build an asset that could serve and that people could be involved with and interact with. Now, I don't want you all knocking on the door at some single day, but for anyone who hasn't been, just reach out to Charlie or others and we can kind of come and have a look and have a talk. And that's what it was all about.
And it was all about that. The place is spotless. You never walk into one of these places. I grew up on like depots and there's stuff at industrial site, but you've created all these little walkways. You want people to understand what it's about. So we've got power coming out, we've got heating and cooling.
And I have OCD as well, which is why it's
absolutely spotless.
Yeah.
So the plan there is you're working alongside Newcastle Council as well, aren't you?
Yeah. So it's quite interesting, the partnership within Newcastle. So we, as a private company, have a partnership with vehicles that have been set up to address kind of the net zero transition within Newcastle. So it was awarded in 2018, is it? 2016, 2018, Paul knows. Part from the City Council and Andrea. But it was awarded under the European Journal kind of contract award. And so we've got about £500 million cap of exclusivity for investment within net zero in the city. So it allows us to, as partners, design, develop and kind of invest in the city.
Okay, so to get back to basics there, having this centralised system, what's the big advantage?
Because it's my problem and not anyone else's, I think is the nicest way to put it. But there is a lot of advantages. There's advantages within efficiencies. There's a lot of advantages within it being people involved with these things who do it day in, day out. So what I've found kind of in the city and when we explore and look at other kind of projects or connections is that we have systems that maybe have been designed incorrectly or systems that aren't performing or operating correctly, that have been going for years and years. And a lot of these systems can be aging and old, and it shifts that onus and that responsibility onto like a subject matter expert, or someone who does deal with that day in, day out and can help with those improvements. So you have an improvement in efficiency. And I think the big thing at the minute with kind of the transition to decarbonised heat is, if I was to do something in one area and it's at scale and it could supply everyone, but if we were to look at units being a traditional system, everyone's starting to have to replace boilers and go on like that. There's limitations within the technology, and the cost is more as well. It's kind of economies of scale.
And all of this, though, is about how much does the average person understand what's going on here. Yeah. I am that average person. 10 megawatts. How many homes is that going to need?
Well, that's an interesting question as well, actually. But if you think at home, typically, or if I look at my house, kind of probably 2016, 2017 built 4-bedroom house, I've got a 30 kilowatt boiler, so, you know, a few times more than that, 300, 400.
Right.
The thing is that if we look at, say, the properties that are to come onto Helix, their efficiencies should be hugely improved. So
are you talking about the homes?
Yeah,
the homes to be built.
The homes towards the back of Helix that'll be developed and built over time. You might see that a 4-bedroom house requires 5 kilowatts instead of kind of the traditional 30. So when we're at scale like this, it can be spread out.
We'll get into properties and stuff very shortly. Now, you did mention Farah. Farah Hussain here from Newcastle City Council. Let's throw you the mic ball, because this has... That was so close. Because the thing is, Farah, you've already started doing stuff for the council, haven't you? And kind of making these energy efficiencies across the board and using all of this technology. What have you done so far?
So the project that connected the Helix Energy Centre to the Discovery Museum, Bladford House, we did that. We also connected this building. We've made fabric improvements to the Discovery Museum, Theatre Royal, 5 major leisure centres, 4 primary schools, 11 privately managed schools, so about 30 properties. We've either fully decarbonised the heating systems and or installed fabric improvements and upgrades and solar PV so that they're generating their own electricity now.
Right. We'll get back to the whole property side of things, but what keeps coming up here is yours is still gas powered. Why?
Because the truth is the technology is still at a very, very early phase, and we've got to be careful about, to be quite honest here, we've got to be careful about when we invest as well as what we invest in. If we were to spend, I am looking at a heat pump project at the minute for the energy centre. 3 megawatt heat pump all in probably comes at about £4 million plus. A gas boiler of that size is probably about £120,000 with burner and everything else, the associated control system. So there's still kind of a gap there, but we will make a credible step and we will move forward. But we've also got to allow the technology to kind of improve and look at what other credible options there are for decarbonisation within the city. So we've got other projects and multiple studies underway with like the university, which Sarah contributes to, and other consultants in and around the area to look at the bigger picture. We can make a snap decision on something now, but it might not be the correct long-term thing to do. So it just requires a little bit more thought and a little bit more time.
I think we have Northern Gas Networks here, actually, do we? Northern Gas Networks? Oh, right at the back there. Actually, could we try and get... Is it food? Yeah, people down at the front of this, okay. Because I think on this aspect of power generation, what is the position of you guys in terms of, people, you've got a power station there, it's being powered by gas, that's, I'm guessing, great news for you. But here's somebody considering about, is that the way forward for the long term?
No, to be fair, what Kirk has just said there resonates with our forward-looking strategy for business as well. We're trying to develop hydrogen as an alternative to methane. So my responsibility within Northern Gas is looking at hydrogen development, which can be utilised both for resilience storage and as an energy vector. So, but the example about heat pumps is one that I'm closely familiar with our project for converting Redcar in Teesside to be the first village in the world potentially to roll out hydrogen instead of methane.
Hydrogen village at Redcar. If people didn't know about that, we'll find out a little bit more in a moment. Is there anything that you need to know from Northern Gas Networks while you're sitting here?
No, we
We still in Mike?
our boilers are hydrogen ready as well. We are already prepared for a degree of hydrogen within the grid. So we made a step very early on with the design, but all of these credible things have to come forward.
So hydrogen, is there any reason that you're just looking at that?
In terms of decarbonisation, we acknowledge that our portfolio of customers will have to decline for us to meet our net zero targets of 2050. So hydrogen produced through electrolysis is a means to get us that journey into climate change.
So for the average person like me, people, you wonder, is it safe? Is hydrogen safe?
Yes, there's been years of research done. It's a very emotive subject, Charlie. Let's be really candid. It's really difficult standing up here from the oil and gas industry. I've definitely drawn the short straw on this. Yeah. Well, we're certainly on the path to moving away from fossil fuels. There's an awful lot to be said in relation to the rare reliance on natural gas now, and I think, Kirk, your example of still running off natural gas would probably be linked to reliability and resilience as well in terms of other means of renewable energy. Sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow, as we're aware. The backbone of our energy system is today taken by gas, but there's an awful lot of development, particularly in the northeast of England, in relation to moving away to greener fuels.
I'm going to give you a round of applause, Fergal, because I have literally put you on the spot.
When we look at other opportunities within the city and we look at where we could potentially develop future energy centres and some of the design that we're doing at the minute, we try and include a kind of link back to Helix as well. So it might be that Helix could, to a degree, still stay as a gas system for resilience, because it potentially still does have a very, very big part to play.
You've made it very happy there.
Yeah, I give him a little bit of a list on that bit. But,
you mentioned the hydrogen village. I'm going to bring in somebody else who's actually based here in the core, and it's Explain Market Research. Kim Davis is at the front, and I want you all to know Kim, because I think this is pretty fascinating. So in this building here, you might have received calls where people asking about utilities, how do you feel about your gas, how do you feel about your electricity, or stopped on the street, those type of things. It was probably by a team of Geordies who work under this lady here. This company has just been expanding massively, and it's because you got the contracts on behalf of Northern Gas Networks and Northern Power Grid as well to go and do the market research with the public. But not only that, they're only awarded to one company for all of these organisations across the UK, and you got it. So yes, so Explain Market Research, Kim's over here. So you've been asking people their feelings about gas and utilities and so on. But can we just hone in on that hydrogen village element? Because people might not have realised about that. You did some research there, didn't you, Redcar?
Yeah, so with Fergal, we've done a lot of work with local residents, just talking about hydrogen, how we feel. If you were in this position, it's your home. How do you feel about that as a potential change, and starting to understand what do you start to think about? And Fergal and I have spent many hours with customers talking about this, but it's the obvious things that you start to think about. How will I need a new cooker? How will my cooker work? What happens to my home? What do I need to change? So I suppose as you start to think about these things, it raises a lot of questions, but you don't really think about until you put yourself in the position of it's a possible reality.
So what are the answers to those things? If you go hydrogen, you need to change your cooker and stuff, Fergal. Yeah, throw it back. Whoa! Nice catch.
So there's two different ways of us not having to adapt our behaviour as consumers. So within GSMR, which is the gas quality regs in the UK, our gas quality regs, you can take up to 20% blend with our appliances. Now, there's the certification applied to our appliances, domestic appliances, which is a project actually that for the first time in the UK ever through a live network we're very proud that we led in Gateshead. So last year, we blended 20% hydrogen into domestic consumers and small businesses in just outside Rodenskill and Winladen, to demonstrate to the HSE that we transport a mixed fuel blend in the north in the public network safely, and that worked really, really well.
Was that the first time in the UK, you said?
It was the first time in the world into
First time in the world?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So blending 20% hydrogen. I need to be really, really clear though, in terms of carbon emissions. The calorific value of hydrogen in a gaseous form is less than methane. So the natural gas that we all use today is actually of a very good quality. It was historically, when it was brought in off the North Sea, it was known as the dry gas. So it's got a very high calorific value. So when you mix hydrogen with methane, the actual carbon benefit, it's by volume, you have to use 3 times as much hydrogen in a gaseous form as methane to get the same calorific value. So then, simple maths, being an engineer, divide 20% by 3, you're only getting a 7% carbon reduction in terms of carbon dioxide. But the 7% carbon reduction across the UK would be, if it was rolled out across the UK, would be equivalent to taking 4.5 million diesel vehicles off the road.
Wow.
So blending for hydrogen, everybody could do, and there is no consumer changes needed. All your appliances, your boilers, your hob, etc., your behaviour in terms of how you use a gas, there's no changes needed. And it's a different scenario, Charlie, when you go to 100%. So 100% hydrogen is what Kim and I have been working on in Redcar in terms of consumer perception. That requires appliance changes. So that requires your boilers being changed, your hob being changed. Everything that we utilize natural gas for today needs to be changed. So the project that we're undertaking in Redcar, because it's the first time it's ever been done, it's a part of the 10-point plan. This will all be undertaken free of charge with consumers. What's really, really interesting, and guys, before I became employed by the oil and gas industry, I'm actually a chartered engineer and worked on renewables, so I'm not all bad. I'm bad. But we are genuinely trying. We do feel that we have a part to play in our journey towards net zero. But what's really, really interesting, and Kim's experienced this as well, is actually when it becomes your problem on your doorstep as a consumer, what changes you're willing to make to play your part as part of net zero. And because of our proud history of gas usage in the UK, people are actually really affectionate towards using a gas hob, is what we found. And they like the thermal comfort of what they're used to. Now, from a technical point of view, nobody is going to argue that the coefficient of performance on a heat pump in a correctly insulated property wipes the floor with natural gas for heat. Wipes the floor. You get about 3 times as much energy out as you put in. So it's about a 3-to-1 ratio in a heat pump. You're not going to compete with that with any fuel. But when you introduce humans into this aspect, that's where it becomes really, really interesting. Because irrespective of the environmental credentials of heat pumps, we have a long journey to go to change people's mindset towards their part in net zero.
Completely. I think that's a really interesting point. It's something that's going to come up time and time again. God, throw back. So returning back into this power option, I mean, what else have we got in terms of power up here? What could the North East lead the way on? I mean, we've got Dogger Bank, of course, the world's largest offshore wind farm. That's being developed at the moment.
We've got the River Tyne as well.
Ah.
So one of the interesting things about Newcastle, and it's difficult as a person as you walk around and you see the city and it feels big, but I have a map at the energy centre that I kind of always fall back to, because you can see the density of Newcastle, and you can actually see how dense it is in such a short and small area, and how close it is to the river. So we have studies underway exploring potentially what heat could be extracted from the river without impacting kind of the local environment. We've got plenty of things underway there, but yeah, that's one of the options.
Geothermal?
Geothermal, I'll not talk too much about it because you've got Sarah and I'll make a mess of it otherwise. But geothermal is a credible option. There is a borehole on Helix, which I'm sure Sarah will talk about now. And there is other studies underway to look at real true deep geothermal, kind of down to 5-6 kilometers, and to extract heat naturally from the earth, which has a really interesting benefit. So one of the things, and I'm sure Sarah will correct us if I get it wrong, with Helix.
You're allowed to heckle.
So with Helix, the borehole, it kind of proved the thermal gradient and it proved the geology of the area. So we actually got down to a depth, it was about 2 kilometers, and understood what kind of heat was there initially and what the geology looked like through the stages. And the geologists, who are hyper clever, know where that is common throughout. And if we look at maybe pulling 36 degrees per kilometer, and we go down 5-6 kilometers, we're at a point where we can get the trigeneration, so we can create electricity, we can create heating, we can create cooling, we can kind of reduce the burden on old consumers or steam consumers. There's a lot that can be done with that. So that is another credible option for decarbonisation. So when we talk about this investment and when we make it and what we make it in, we have to make credible steps forward, but we also have to be cautious not to initially overinvest, and make sure that we allow the other technologies or options around to develop.
So you're waiting.
Not waiting, because we are doing something. We are doing something. So by 2025, all things being well, the Helix, the energy centre, the primary source of heat should be a heat pump. And so it should operate in that way. We're kind of exploring options for green PPAs as well, so that we know the electricity coming into site is also credible and green.
Green PPA?
Power purchasing agreement. So that we buy specifically from a wind farm or solar farm or kind of other, which helps improve the overall kind of carbon intensity of the heat that's produced by the network. But there's a lot of work to do in that. It isn't, and it's the same in homes. There's a lot of good points made there about the human element in this transition. The technology is kind of there, but integrating it to suit our day-to-day and to not impact our comfort is the bit that requires a little bit more work. So yes, we're underway. We are decarbonising. We're not just doing nothing.
Right.
And we're not just waiting. All these studies are underway now. They're all live. They're all active. They're all being pursued and developed, and renewed kind of constantly. So we've got some finishing in May. We've got some that hopefully are starting in June, July, and that just continually brings things forward. So what I would say is that we probably went from maybe 2028, 2030 on some projects. Now potentially they could be 2025. So a real...
So you're not sitting back?
No. I have got all these new grey hairs.
You're a very busy man. Thank you, Kurt.
You're welcome.
Kurt Wallace. And the whole deal is you're allowed to go to the District Energy Centre. It is, you've got lined walkways, haven't you? So just give me a shout, oh, Kirk, and he'll show you around. Thank you so much. Well, he's name dropped there quite a bit, actually. But we're time to look for buildings and all the implications there. So please welcome to BrainFood, Professor Sarah Walker, the full title Director of the Centre for Energy at Newcastle University. Now, the joke has made about you is basically, so you've got this absolutely during all this brain, Sarah, that everybody talks about, and
You did say that everyone in the room was an expert. Well, not just me.
But I've had to really focus you down just on one thing for the subject of today. So it is buildings. And I think I want to talk about this in terms of, like, UK-wide, we have a very, very old property stock, don't we? It's, I think, very, very, it's probably the oldest in Europe.
So,
Yes,
compared
in Europe. Yes.
to other mainland European countries, we might not be in the EU, but we are in Europe as a continent. Compared to the rest of mainland Europe, our building stock is relatively old. It's relatively uninsulated. And so when we look at the performance of our building stock and how we can improve it, the positive thing is there's lots we can improve, but that's because we're starting from a bit of a poor point. But about 25% of your heat loss is through your roof, about 35% is through your walls, about 15% is through your doors and windows, and about 10% is through your floor.
Wow. So there's a lot of opportunities to insulate.
Yeah.
Different types. We've got loft insulation, cavity wall insulation, and then solid insulation as well. And why isn't everybody doing that?
Partly it's down to disruption. So when we look at the research and we ask people, why aren't you insulating your loft? Part of the problem is you have to empty your loft out in order to get up there and put the insulation in. It can be disruptive and messy, particularly some of the loft insulation and wall insulation can be messy. The other thing is cost. So there are lots of pressures on our purse and our priorities over things like capital expenditure that will save me money in the long term. It's quite hard to balance having to pay now for something that will save money for a long period of time. And we're not rational consumers anyway. Anyone who does economic studies will talk about the rational consumer and say that we work out payback periods on things. We don't. We buy a new kitchen because we like a new kitchen, and we don't work out how that will save us money because it doesn't. And so, there are different reasons as to why we spend some more money on other things than insulating our homes. What we therefore potentially need is better regulation and better government support to enable retrofit to happen so that this fabric improvement, which was mentioned before, actually happens across the whole building stock and not just the stuff that public authorities like the council have control over.
Let's bring in Farah again on that, because you have done a lot of retrofitting on the public buildings, haven't you?
Yes, on the non-domestic stock.
Right, but it's expensive.
Loft insulation isn't that expensive, and it does really improve the thermal properties of a building. But one of the issues is where you have a solid wall, for example. So if you've got like a stone wall and there's no cavity in between, you have to add a new skin to the... I know this starts sounding like a builder, but it's not always straightforward. So the most straightforward is you do a cavity wall and you do your roof. The more complicated stuff is under the floor because of the disruption. Single walls, that's also a problem. But yes, we're going through all of our properties, topping up insulation, putting in insulation where it's been missed, and doing what we can. And then we do that, improve the fabric, and then bring in a low carbon heating source. That's the theory.
The low carbon heating source. When it comes to, I'm kind of like, they're all interlinked, aren't they? You were talking before about the gas boilers and so on. The civic centre uses modes, doesn't it? It just consumes gas. So you did a big swap.
Yes.
Yeah. There aren't any gas boilers there now, are there? What have you got?
We've got a very large air source heat pump installation which runs off electricity. However, we have retained the gas boilers because the air source heat pumps struggle when the temperature dips below a certain level. So like if it gets to -5, the building management system will tell the air source heat pumps to settle down whilst the gas boilers come on and bring the system back to temperature. So the gas is there as resilience, but otherwise we are no carbon.
So what do you do about that in your own home? So if you're going to get rid of your gas boiler and swap it for an air source heat pump, you still have to keep your gas boiler just in case it gets too cold?
So about 70% of the energy used in the home is for space and water heating. And the other bits are for your electricity, for your appliances and so on. And so heat pumps in the UK, air source heat pumps in the domestic sector, we think, based on research, that there pretty much is no property that couldn't run on an air source heat pump. It's all to do with the size of the air source heat pump that you need compared to the amount of heat loss, and therefore the fabric improvement is a really important first step, because the more you can cut back on the heat loss, then the smaller your system needs to be. As Kurt said, 30 kilowatt compared to a brand new property that might only be 7 kilowatt. And so the more you can reduce your heat loss, then the smaller your heat pump needs to be. And then your air source heat pump performance is affected by outdoor air temperature. So they're designed in the UK for about a -2 as a winter temperature average. But air source heat pumps work in Norway. Norway is colder than the UK. And Norwegian homes, about 70% of Norwegian homes have air source heat pumps fitted. So if they can do it, we can do it.
Why aren't we doing it then?
Partly we're not doing it because back in the 70s and 80s, we discovered North Sea gas. And this was great for the UK economy to encourage everyone to get central heating using gas, because we had a local gas industry. Not to disparage Northern Gas Networks at all, but it was at the time a cheap option for us. Now we realise that it's a carbon intensive option for us. Not the most carbon intensive, but it does have carbon associated with it. So how do we move away from carbon intensive heating? We can have heat networks that are low carbon. We can have heat pumps. And potentially we could have other renewable sources like geothermal. We could also have hydrogen. And so there's different ways of moving away from the carbon intensive ways that we currently heat.
Different ways, theoretically, but in practice it can be a very different thing. Has anybody here got an air source heat pump either at their office or their home? Or
if you want it at your office or at your home, then many more hands should go up, because a lot of offices have heat pumps. I work in the Urban Sciences building.
who works at the Urban Sciences building?
Heat pump.
Heat pump?
Yeah.
You've got one there. Oh, you've got it. Oh, Nasheen is saying, let's get the mic ball over there. So Nasheen is at Home Group. So our neighbours who are over there, you've got a brand new purpose-built building. So did you go all out on all of this stuff?
Yes. So our building is off gas. It's EPC A. It's BREEAM excellent, and it's actually got one of the few buildings in the UK with a smart score status as well.
What is that?
So God knows what it means. It means it is highly energy efficient, but also works with the people and how many bodies are in the building at any given time. So very clever.
Wow. I feel like that is happening here. Isn't that some kind of like monitoring systems that are going on the Helix site? Can we just pass this along here to John Seeger, who's the director of the Helix estate? Oh, isn't there monitoring within these buildings?
Well, you really put me on the spot there. There is a company, SPG, that's based in the core that is leading on technology that's monitoring. And if there's anyone from SPG here...
Anybody from SPG? Oh, here we go. So push it across. Fantastic. This is true, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, it is indeed. Yeah. So we've currently got a system running in this building, which is monitoring the occupancy of the building. It's monitoring the utility usage in the building. It's monitoring how the space is used. And then it's making predictions about how much energy is going to be required. And then ultimately what the CO2e output is going to be, as well as the utility cost and the utility usage. That's what we're doing here. We're also doing it with a couple of councils with regards to social housing. And then naturally there's a commercial property, non-domestic property piece as well.
This sounds a little bit Big Brother-ish though.
Yeah, no, it's not at all. So, it's completely anonymized and fully secure in terms of the technology. It's all industry standard type stuff, but it could be anything. What we're trying to do is triangulate data sources. So it doesn't matter whether it's a sensor under a desk or somebody coming in with a fob. We're not identifying who the person or people are. We're just identifying the number of bodies that might be in a space. Because the reality is, I think the human behavior thing is really, really important, because it's the human behavior that drives everything. So how a human and how humans use a building determines how much energy is required, determines how much utility is being consumed, and ultimately then that drives cost. So those things are all the problem that we set out to try and solve.
So we need that data.
Yeah, we do. And research has shown that two identical buildings with the same number of occupants can have a difference in energy demand of about 40%. On paper, they should be exactly the same, but the way that the people are using those buildings, these are domestic properties, can still be very different, and that can affect the overall consumption. But just to come back to, these different types of technologies, the important thing is that it provides the thermal comfort that people need, and it's affordable, either to buy in the first place or to run. And so those aspects are really important while we're still coming out of, hopefully, a cost of living crisis, which has pushed many more people into fuel poverty in the UK.
Would you mind passing that ball just to this gentleman in front of you, Matt?
Just so they don't have to throw it.
I'm trusting. I'm trusting go. Matt, you said that you have an air source heat pump. Tim, how big's your house?
Not that big.
Did you move into the house and they were already there, or did you? Well, now you're just showing off, right? So you built a house.
Pass it.
And then put them in. Okay. Why did you go for an air source heat pump? Was it like an experiment? You're an engineer, so was this a kind of experiment for you?
You know my credentials. Yeah, I can put gas in my house. I can, it's very difficult to do what I do and think it's all right to burn carbon in the house. So, the house is entirely electric. With PVs on the roof, I've got 40 kilowatt hours of battery in the garage, and I've got 2 air source heat pumps. And I am completely off the grid.
Well, in many ways. What does it feel? What difference has that made to you financially? Or have you not been able to? Because a lot of these things are there's a lot of upfront costs. There's a lot of upfront costs. So how soon do you think you'll be able to make that back?
The payback is about 8 years. So given my age, I am probably not going to be the fundamental beneficiary of it all. It's looking at the kids. But that wasn't the driver. The driver was I didn't want to burn carbon in the house. So there's no gas fires, despite the fact Amy wanted a gas fire. There's no gas cookers, despite the fact I wanted a gas cooker. That was the quid pro quo. So there are 2 air source heat pumps. The PVs generate about 15 to 16 kilowatts as an installation, and it's all stored and managed through the building control systems that does things like when we need to charge the cars, it charges it from the battery that's being charged during the day by the PVs. And every now and again on the app, I see that it draws power from the grid. But that's for peak stuff. It's very indeterminate as to what's driving that.
And is he living the dream life for a lot of people? But maybe not the reality for many.
So, the dream would be that our buildings are zero carbon, and to achieve that, they need to be very energy efficient. And passive house is a standard that is very low energy demand.
Passive house, I hadn't even heard that phrase.
Yeah, so it's a standard description of properties where the energy demand is a certain amount per metre squared of floor area.
That's why I've heard of it.
Yeah. So it's a very specific description that's come about over time as people have come up with different ways of trying to make our buildings much more energy efficient through different design mechanisms. Is it living the dream? About 3 billion people on our planet do not have access to clean cooking fuel. That is 40% of the global population. They are burning wood, dung, kerosene, and as a result of poor indoor air pollution, 3.2 million people a year die due to poor living conditions due to their use of dirty cooking fuels. This clean option is most definitely the way to go. 3.2 million people per year, by the way, is 3.7 times the population of Newcastle every year dying from air pollution. And so, yes, we need to move away from these fuels that are dirty. We need to do it in a way that is cost effective. If we in the UK can learn and share that understanding with those other countries that need to move away from these dirty fuels, then together as a global community, we can achieve that dream.
Can we throw the mic ball back over to Nasheen Hussain there? Because Nasheen got a very particular interest in properties and environmentally friendly ways of working. What's your feelings on all of this? And particularly being with home groups, you know, you're dealing with a certain part of the community who don't own their own properties.
Yes. So we've got 55,000 social homes nationally and 120,000 customers, social housing tenants nationally. In the UK, 25 million homes, and social homes make up around 5 million homes. So quite a substantial proportion. And actually, the homes that we own between sort of all the housing associations in the UK, in terms of energy efficiency, is around 60% EPC C or lower. So actually, it's an all right number, but we've got a long way to go. Based on what you said, Sarah, in terms of the oldest sort of housing stock in Europe, we've got a big challenge. In terms of our portfolio, you know, most of our homes are sort of pre-war, right? So in terms of energy efficiency, it's a huge challenge. And I think there is some funding available, right? But the housing associations, we're tasked with building safety, fire safety, building more affordable homes. And, you know, we're a charitable status, we've got limited budget. So it is a challenge. There is some funding, as I said, but it makes up 4% of the investment required to get to net zero. So that's where we are. We are on a journey. We have started decarbonising our homes. We've got lots of pilots running at the moment. But what we decided as an organisation was that we weren't going to be at the forefront of testing new tech. We will be at the front of the mid-pack because the tech is still clunky. It's still sort of first, second generation. And when we installed sort of earlier heat pumps, we found that we couldn't find engineers, for example, to maintain them. So we had engineers coming from Scotland, for example. So these are the, you know, day-to-day challenges that we have to kind of work with. And I suppose from a resident's perspective, you know, we talked about resident engagement is key to all of this, and residents can't feel as if they're being done to as part of this. So they have to be with you on this journey, both sort of actually before you do whatever clean heat intervention you're planning to do within the homes, but also during and also afterwards, right? So as I said, the tech is really clunky. You need an MBA to operate some of these heat pumps and whatnot, and the user interfaces. So I think there's some work to do there in terms of the supply chain, in terms of the tech. So quite a few challenges, but as I said, we're on that journey. So Home Group has done created this kind of sector-wide collaboration called Greener Future Partnerships, where we've teamed up with 5 like-minded national housing associations to lead on decarbonising our homes. And the idea is to share resources, to share best practice learning, and also funds. So apply for joint funding. So rather than everybody doing the same thing, making the same mistakes and not talking to one another, let's do this collectively. And I think what I'd like to see is more collaboration, not just within our sector, outside of the sector as well.
Would you agree with that?
I think collaboration is a really important point, and learning from one another. So this idea around social housing, the government has come up with policies to try and encourage social housing providers to improve their building stock and to hopefully then enable that learning to move out to the rest of the housing stock. As a population, the UK has quite a high proportion of homeowners. even if you've got a mortgage, you're classed as a homeowner. And so it's motivating those individuals who own their own homes to actually make that investment as well. Building up that supply chain knowledge is really important with those skills. And so in areas where these technologies are still relatively new and the domestic sector retrofit is predominantly an SME industry that employs local people. So this potentially is local jobs for local people to grow the local economy by improving our local housing stock. And doing that in collaboration to share that learning is a really useful way to try and speed things up.
So there's a real opportunity there.
An opportunity economically to really grow our economy, to improve our housing stock and to create and secure jobs.
I'm thinking on the job side of things, you've got all of these quality registered, installers and gas engineers. How difficult is it for them to make the switch to then, turn up at somebody's house and say, you know what, the gas boiler isn't going to be the answer for you long term. You're going to be in this house 20 years. How's about we go for an air source heat pump? I know you don't even understand what it is. I'll explain. Let's assess it. There are many of those people out there right now.
At the moment, no. So there is a push that's coming slightly from the industry itself, actually, to upscale. So if you want to learn more about this, there's a person called Heat Geek who is on YouTube, and his videos are really good at explaining what an air source heat pump is and how it works. And he's trying to upscale the industry by putting on specific training to enable those engineers who currently do heat loss calculations and work out what size of system you need. He's working on enabling those individuals to learn more about the alternative technologies like hydrogen boilers, like air source heat pumps, like heat networks, to enable them to better understand what the technology options are that they could be offering to their customers.
Can we get the mic ball back to Kim Davis here of Explain Market Research? Because this is the nub of it, isn't it? It's the public. It's getting them on board to understand what they're going to have put into, so it doesn't feel like it's being done to them. So they feel like it's actually, they understand what's going in their own home.
It's decision making, and one of the things that we uncover quite a lot with the general public is when you're making these decisions, that quite often it's a crisis time, isn't it? Something doesn't work at all, and you want it quickly. If you've got no hot water, you want it fixed. So your immediate answer is replace a boiler with a boiler, or whatever system like that. And I think what you just mentioned there about actually having the right people to advise and give you guidance at that point to make a different decision, or to be educated enough upfront to know when the time comes, I know what I will do. But I think, in line with what you mentioned before as well about not thinking long term on purchase and cost is a huge one that we come across that all of the time, that not necessarily think about when will I get the cost benefit of this, but what can I afford right now as well still outweighs the long-term benefits.
And in your research, you also looked at people's behaviour within the homes as well, because one option is when you actually say choose to charge or choose to put things on, put the washer on at night and things like that. So how did people feel about that?
Yeah, so again, we've done various pieces of work that is about its behaviour change. So we're used to in our homes, you switch things on when you want to switch them on, and actually thinking about, would you be prepared to use your washing machine at 2:00 in the morning if that actually was better use, or it was cheaper, or it helps to balance out the energy requirements, and it's early stage. I think some people are very open to that, and as soon as you talk about there's cost savings with it, absolutely. But if it's just wider benefits, but I don't get an immediate benefit right now, it's much harder to convince people it's the right thing to do.
Would you put your washer on if it had a timer? Would you put it on? Yeah,
I would, because then it just sits there wet for less time because it's...
What if there was no timer on your washing machine? You had to invest in a new one.
Well, then it becomes a...
Anybody get up at 2 in the morning to put the washer on? No.
No chance.
No chance. It's an interesting one. I know we're about to move on to electric vehicles. I need to just get a little perspective of you on Dogger Bank, because there's so much talk about this. Offshore wind farm. Can you just explain to people, it's happening within stages, it's very near, it could really change the way we live, couldn't it?
So Dogger Bank, once finished, will be the largest offshore wind farm until the next one comes along. And In fact, Dogger Bank have put in an application to expand. So they're doing it in 3 stages, but potentially there might be others. Equinor, who is the operations and maintenance company supporting Dogger Bank construction and operation long term, they're based out of Port of Tyne. So it's a very local development. We have the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult based in Blyth, who are doing lots of research on the potential for offshore wind. There was a mention earlier of hydrogen and the potential for hydrogen to help with aspects of what happens when there's too much wind or there's not enough wind and you want to be able to have some storage on your electricity system. The electricity system has to balance supply and demand on a second-by-second basis, otherwise the frequency goes out of kilter and everything stops. And so storage is an important aspect of thinking about this bigger picture, whole systems, what's going to happen. And offshore wind potentially could enable us to generate green hydrogen and store that, and then enable us to use the hydrogen at times when we haven't got the electricity. The other aspect of offshore wind is a lot of it's in Scotland as well, and there's only a certain amount of wires that go between England and Scotland, and they're a bit overused at the moment. So potentially hydrogen helps us get over the aspects of the electricity system being constrained, but essentially we need to invest in our electricity system as well in order to enable all of this lovely renewables to actually get on the system and to be generating clean electricity for us. There's a big connection queue in the UK, and we'd really like to get all those new renewable technologies connected to the system and generating for us.
Because until there was talk of blackouts, and people just assumed that there is this never-ending supply of electricity. But there really isn't. Have we got much headroom in the northeast?
In the northeast, we're a bit blessed, I suppose, with a few onshore wind farms. We've got the connection with the Netherlands. So we actually have an interconnector coming in at Camas near Blyth.
It's like a giant cable, isn't it?
Yeah, a giant cable that connects us to the rest of Europe. And so if we were cut off from the rest of the UK, we have some biomass locally, we have some onshore wind, we have some offshore wind. But it's better to collectively look at the UK as a whole, because at times when it might be less windy up in northern Scotland, perhaps it is a little bit sunny in southern England, and so we can balance out some of the weather situations as well as some of the demand. It's different demands in different locations, particularly heavy industry are located in certain places like Teesside. And so the more we can have a diverse collection of load and a diverse collection of generation, that helps us with all of that balancing to happen.
Does anybody have any questions for Sarah while we're here? She's a font of knowledge. Can I ask one thing, which is just I'm struggling to picture it. Storage. So say you have all of this extra electricity. What does that look like?
Well, you can
store it.
You can store it in the form of water. So you can use electricity to pump it up a hill, store the water there, and then at times that you would like the electricity back, you send it back through the turbines and back down the hill. It's called pumped hydro. You can store it in the form of compressed air. So you can compress the air using electricity when you've got lots of spare electricity. And then when you want the electricity back, you can allow the air to decompress. You can store it in the form of hydrogen, so you can get an electrolyzer, you can have water in it, you run electricity through it, and the H2O breaks up into hydrogen and oxygen, and you can collect those, and then you can use the hydrogen for other things. And you can use batteries. We all have batteries in our phone, lithium-ion batteries. We have batteries in our cars. We used to use in batteries. We can just get very big batteries if we wanted and put those on the system. And we can use second life batteries as well. So the cars that the batteries are at the end of their life, potentially we don't throw them away. We can use them as storage on the electricity system. So there's lots of different ways that we can store the extra electricity as and when we need to.
You seem quite hopeful about this.
I love my job and learning about new things and being passionate about renewables and energy efficiency and hopefully saving the world.
Well, thank you. The Northeast is pretty unique in many ways. So we've got the UK's largest car plant. We have the UK's only battery plant. We've already got a whole electric battery ecosystem. We'll hear a little bit more about that. Ready to expand as well with mining in Wearside, and then you take the processing in Teesside. I mean, this is all quite exciting stuff. And then on top of that, we've got the universities locally with all of this expertise right on hand, including Newcastle University. So let's bring in Ruth Dixon. Ruth Dixon is from our region's Driving the Electric Revolution Industrial Centre. Derek, for short. You guys and your electric vehicles and the acronyms, there's just so many. Right, okay, you have vast engineering experience with supercars, which everybody was is very exciting. But what are you doing with Derek?
Yeah, so I guess I started my career 25 years ago before we knew any better. So yes, for my stations, I worked in sort of supercars, hypercars, all of those kinds of things. So the UK has a really, really strong niche vehicle sector that, does all of those high performance, exciting cars. And I did lots of work in the States as well. So what we're trying to do now, though, is help that industry transition across to electrification. So what we're doing with the DEL centres, we're a network of centres nationally through the UK. We're trying to provide the right facilities to enable all of the manufacturers to prove out their designs and systems before they have to make those big capital investments to transition their factories across.
Right.
So the point is to make it easy to use that risk.
So to help industry make these changes, it's a programme through Newcastle University, but you're not based here. You're actually over in Sunderland because opposite Nissan's plant, there's a massive investment there in the automotive industry, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's an advanced manufacturing park down there. So lots of relevant industry in the space.
Right. Electric cars, where to begin? I had years at the BBC having debates about electric cars and people calling them milk float. It's all changed now. However, I think there is still an issue with the chemistry in the battery. So cobalt is used. That's very popular.
Cobalt, lithium, there are many, many, many materials. I think, all of these things, we're improving the way that we use these things all the time. But what we do mean to do is make sure that we treat those resources as, finite things that need to be used well. We need to reuse, batteries for second life. We need to make sure that at the end of life, we're designing systems that can be, have the materials extracted really easily to be reused. And I think that's where there's a lot of research and, huge opportunity to really improve the systems.
I'm going to have to bring him in because he keeps being brought up. Can we get the mic ball to... This is Matthew Lumsden, everybody, from Connected Energy. Second life batteries. So one of the big issues with electric vehicles is once they reach a certain point, then it's doff. So what do you do with the battery? And you've bought it because you want it all be all green, but actually it's just going to be polluting the atmosphere and going into places that shouldn't go. This is where you come in.
So as you drive around in your electric vehicle, you charge it and you leave it standing, the battery is continually degrading. And it gets to a point where either the capacity of the battery can't provide enough power or enough energy for you to travel the distances you'd like to travel, or it gets replaced through warranty, or the rest of the vehicle's replaced and those batteries are available. And you think about your toothpaste tube first thing in the morning, we'll squeeze that last bit of value out of the toothpaste tube. And what we're about is getting that final piece of value out of the batteries. And really, when they're no longer suited for cars, there's probably still 50% of the value left in that battery that's accessible to provide energy storage for the wider grid.
50%?
Yeah, so typically, at the moment, they're probably sitting in cars for maybe 10 years at the moment. Some of the earlier ones are replaced after 6 or 7 years, but up to about 10 years at the moment. Typical electric bus battery warranties will be 8 years. So we're working on a transition around about that period of time. And then if we put those in a stationary energy storage system, we can get another equivalent length of time out, depending on how they're used.
Stationary energy storage system. Okay, what does that look like?
So that's what Sarah was talking about earlier. We've obviously got to balance the supply and demand on the grid, supply and the load on the grid. And obviously, as we get more and more variable generation from PV, offshore wind, onshore wind, etc., and there is value in helping national grid to match the supply and demand on the grid. So you can plug energy storage into the grid to help manage the frequency of the grid. And you as an operator of that storage system can generate revenue from doing that. You can make money out of plugging your batteries into a grid. But also, there's resilience, there's security of supply, and a lot of people are trying to do what we've been talking about today, which is optimizing the overall energy system on your site. So you might want to make the best, in fact, exactly what Matt was talking about earlier, getting best value from your solar on your roof. You might have some big spikes in your load with your washing machine or your tumble dryer. So, you can use batteries to manage those loads so that you're matching the supply of low carbon electricity with the demand. And that's where we operate our system.
And you've got deals with certain motor manufacturers, haven't you, to use the...
Yeah, so we're pretty much at the cutting edge of this, and this is a whole value chain thing. So we're working right from battery manufacturers to fleet operators to the vehicle manufacturers, electric vehicle manufacturers, through the energy storage sector, right through to recyclers. And we're now starting to look at, well, if we monitor the batteries in the vehicles, we can then get a better view as to when is the best time to transfer them into energy storage and when is the best time to transfer them into through to recycling. And, we're partnering with the National Innovation Centre for Data, NICD, who I never don't mention because they're fantastic. So they've taught us and they've enabled us to build AI systems and data handling systems within our business so we can pull all of the data out of the batteries, really optimize how we extract that battery, that value. And we're moving up to systems with thousands of batteries. So and they're all different. They're all different levels of degradation for you to use that data to really, maximize the value from across the whole value chain.
Right. It's data again. It's just like what Gareth was saying from SPG. That's the key to it. So that feels a little bit more like, it might be a good investment to get an electric vehicle because it's also got a second life in that battery and I need to not feel so bad about it when it finishes. But there are still a few other problems, aren't there?
Yeah, well, I think everything that we're doing, it's all about efficiency. So there's lots of technologies coming up now to lightweight vehicles to make them more efficient and the recyclability of that whole system as well. So making sure we're just using those materials really well. So what we're actually focusing on at the DER centres is the power electronics machines and drives. So that's the electronics that drive the electric motors that drive your vehicle. And it's those underpinning technologies go across many sectors, many systems, not just the cars. So, we're trying to help the industry really move forward at that because there's a huge opportunity, a huge demand to transition all of these systems across to electrically driven.
Because that must be a big problem for car manufacturers. So not only are you saying, right, okay, coupled with a new design, because people are now wanting to move to electric cars, all policy means you're going to have to, because they're not going to be selling any diesel anymore. So you're going to have to do that, then you're going to have to manufacture it. But you're then going to staff these places with people who aren't used to working in this field.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are some really great skills programs coming up that are trying to support the industry in that transition of their staff. So it's not just about adapting your degrees to make sure that they're providing the right skills at the beginning of the career. It's also about looking at all of that workforce that's out there now and how do you help them transition across. Under the DER program, there's some great programs there. And so looking right from apprenticeship right up to sort of board level skills.
And you're in touch with wide parts of the industry. How do they feel about decommissioning their old plants? Because if you've been making diesel cars very successfully for many years and you've invested in all these factories, it must cost a fortune to swap them over.
It does. So I think you've got to think about the design life of the plant, and sort of the normal renewal cycle would be over decades. So we're asking people to really make sort of what looks like uneconomic investments. And that's where policy becomes so important, because you have to level the playing field. You have to say, okay, industry, you've all got to do this and you're all in the same boat. Otherwise, it's just uncompetitive. So I think, no one is going to make a huge investment at huge cost to their company individually if it's going to set them back against the competitors. So that's why the legislation really matters.
So you need all of those things together, driving them together. Quickly on hydrogen.
Mm-hmm.
So hydrogen cars.
Yeah.
So somebody I was chatting to the other day, there's, all across this field, described them as an absolute nonsense. I wouldn't go that far. There is a place for hydrogen. So if you look at sort of, overall energy of the system, people tend to do sums that say that sort of the electrolysis step and whatever, and by the time you generate the hydrogen and then run it through your car, it's really inefficient. That doesn't matter if you've got an excess of renewables that you can't use otherwise. Right. So if you've got peaks of power coming out of your renewables, as Sarah's been talking about, it makes sense to use the hydrogen.
Right. So even though it's like 3 times as much electricity to get it going and wastes loads of water, potentially. Yeah. Okay. So you need to think of it in the round.
Yes.
Okay. Absolutely. Okay. So maybe not hydrogen cars as a goer, because they're pulling out the pumps in London, aren't they?
But the problem with hydrogen cars at the moment, it's all about the energy density of the system. You can get more energy density in a battery, so your cars can go further potentially from a battery. So it's about sort of the economics of that. At the moment, if there's a real breakthrough with hydrogen storage that makes it, a more energy dense thing that makes sense to carry around in a car, that picture could change quite a lot, I think.
But it could be good for other vehicles.
Yes, and I think certainly on the heavy goods vehicles where batteries are simply too heavy, you lose too much of your payload in your HGVs, so you need to do something else.
Right, so that could become the fuel of choice.
It could.
Rather than electric.
It could.
Where are we at with electric trucks?
I think
in Britain.
Ooh, I think there are electric trucks available up to about 26-ton vehicles now, which is quite a lot of the UK's fleet. But certainly not of the very heaviest vehicles. We don't have electric options. It's just the factory would fill your known capacity. It just doesn't work.
It just doesn't work. Okay. And does anybody here have an electric, apart from that, does anybody here have an electric car? Oh, quite a few. Okay, Kurt, I'm going to go to you. How long have you had it?
And about 2 years.
And is it leased or did you buy it?
It's a company car.
Company car. This is it. I wonder whether they're all company cars on the roads. How's it been for you?
I love it. Actually, I've done about 40,000 miles as well.
Really? For you, when you first got it, was it like this is something I need to do because I believe in this as to fight the climate crisis? Or were you just on a good deal? It was a good deal. But you've been, and you've got family as well, so it's worked for you there. Okay, so you'd recommend?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Get another one now. We're going to get rid of the car.
Okay. Anybody else with an electric car? Oh, Thomas O'Leary, we get the night ball here. Okay. So is this a recent purchase? Wow, that was wow. Is this a recent purchase?
About 6 years now.
Oh, right. Okay. How's it doing?
I love it. On the second one now. We want the newer version of the Nissan Leaf, much more efficient. The only problem with the charging infrastructure.
Right. This is it. So what do you mean? So that for all of us who don't have an electric car, what do you mean? Is this some range anxiety issue?
Kind of. So also that when the chargers go offline, it takes a long time for someone to actually repair them. So there's an issue in Newcastle at the moment where you basically have various stakeholders who are all refusing responsibility for chargers between the council and the owners of the chargers, really. So they stay offline for months, years at a time. There's one on the quayside that's been offline for 18 months now.
I'm going to have to...
I'm going to kill me for this.
Newcastle Council are here. Let's pass me that ball. Just even if... She's dropped it. Even if we don't have a specific answer for this, can we talk about that as a... in the round? Okay. So... the government gives some money, funding for chargers, and the local authorities bid for it. You get that money, and then you install chargers. And then, whose job is it to maintain them?
Okay, I don't get involved in EV, or EV charging. However, what should come with that is a maintenance regime and a servicing regime. So I don't have the answer. I don't know why. Do you have any more information? I'm happy to go back to the...
There's one city road if you want to...
Sorry. It's definitely a recurring problem nationally, though, to defend Newcastle. I think it's quite often discussed that, I think
quite often there's capital investment that's put in place, but not necessarily quite robust enough maintenance. So there's incentives for installing.
Yes.
That's what perhaps the financial structures aren't quite there to maintain.
These are the things that we need to get to the root of. It's great.
I'll take that back to the council, because there should be a servicing regime with that.
So basically, so you install the thing, then you create this maintenance thing, so then there will be
And servicing regime, right? There's no excuse really.
And then on top of that, it isn't just the council who are putting these in. You've got private firms, haven't you, putting in charges in places?
Yes.
So how does that kind of work?
We should have the maintenance and servicing regime, otherwise there's absolutely zero point having an EV charging point.
You went electric with the vehicles at the council, didn't you?
Pool cars.
The pool cars. And how's that been?
It's brilliant as far as I know. I mean, the last time I took a pool car out, I was too frightened of the electric vehicle, so I got a Vauxhall Corsa. So I can't be clear at first hand, but it seems to be working very well. We've got charging points, and they're gradually turning over the whole fleet to electric.
I think you've hit on something very interesting there. You were too scared to use the electric.
Yeah, but they were very open and said, if you've got time, come down, we'll show you how to use it. That was my...
But I think that's the same for a lot of people. I think it is, because it's basically driving around a giant computer, isn't it? So it's a little bit, if you just want to, especially a pool car, you just want to jump in and get somewhere, there is this perception element.
Yeah, but it is just perception, because I think if you give them a go, they are the easiest vehicles of any to drive. They really are. You don't have to worry about gear. It's just, go pedal and stop pedal. That's,
And then so when you head down the kind of driverless car thing, and that makes it even easier, but that's why it scares some of the daylight people, I think there is a public perception element there. Would you mind passing the ball back?
Pass the ball on. I couldn't figure out how to turn on the electric Corsa, because it only had 2 pedals, not 3. So, and I'm not as dumb as I look, so I think there is a problem with that.
Oh, that is interesting. Because it's not what you used to. Yeah. Why are you beeping?
It was probably beeping because you need to put your foot on the brake to snap. We thought this way.
And there we go. It's like an safer. It was like joining an Earth is getting changed firing through a drive. After this, brilliant. I think this kind of public perception of electric vehicles is a major thing. You've been looking into this. How has that changed over the time, Kim? Because I mentioned range anxiety. That used to be all anybody talked about. But now it might be, actually, these vehicles are here right now. What else are they concerned about?
So range anxiety, absolutely something that's been around for a while. I think some of the more recent things that we've looked around is about charging facilities and things, and again, behaviours, expectations. So I think a really interesting one that we always end up talking to the general public about is where you charge. So we've talked about public charging points there, but there is typically an expectation when you buy an electric car, we'll charge it at home, and yet we never fill our cars with petrol or diesel at home. But it's an inherent behaviour that we've encouraged, which it's a big challenge going forward as well. It's not going to be practical for everybody to charge at home, depending on your property type and things, but that for some people is the barrier more than the range anxiety now of I won't be able to charge, which is simply not true because there's plenty of options.
That is really interesting. We don't have forecourts on our driveways. We don't. It's just taking it. Yeah. Is there going to be limits to charging points, do you think, on streets? Because if the grid it can only take so much, can't it?
Well, I think everything has to sort of mature at the same rate. So, we can only transition across to electric vehicles as fast as the slowest link in the chain. So we've got to think about all of this stuff. It's about grid capacity. It's about physical charging spaces and all of those things. And they have to move up together.
On that, I'm just still mindful of council stuff here. And I'm just wondering, the council has so many responsibilities to, say, vulnerable adults. Massive amount of spend has to go into like adult social care and so on like that. Should their money be being spent on charging our cars if we want to park them up in the council car park?
Well, that's a deep question. I think if you want to drive the transition and you want to electrify the city and sort out air quality issues and all of those things, we have to support these things. But obviously that cost needs to be shared through the right model so that right people are paying their fair and appropriate share. And I think, that's, I don't know if this issue is fixed actually, but there was a problem with national grid upgrades that if you want to install electric car chargers in your company car park, whatever it is, if that ticks the demand at your local substation, sort of local region substation over, you'd have to pay the full cost of upgrading that local substation. So that's not a fair way of distributing the cost. So we've got issues like that. Don't know if that one's been fixed. Somebody from Energy Networks might be able to answer that.
Is there anybody here who is across all of that? Anybody? Northern Power Grid? And you've been doing work with Northern Power Grid. Is this something that comes up? Okay.
It's something that comes up, and some of the work we do around connections. I mean, I don't know the answer to whether that's been fixed or not, but it absolutely is. It's an ongoing conversation with organisations that are looking at development and where there is current capacity and where, like you say, it's a future problem, and you can only go as fast as the availability is there.
Anybody else with an electric car? Anyway, and then can we get the mic ball here?
I prefer that on this tiger. Who would the third?
There.
Are they beautiful ones?
Well, I have a funny feeling it's that Nicola Mahmood.
And she
Please, welcome home. Welcome to Brilliant. So Nicola has come down from Edinburgh, but used to work here on the Newcastle Helix site. Staunch environmentalist, all for electric vehicles and all the rest of it. Did you drive here?
No, I got the train.
Why? Why did you get the train?
Honestly, I don't like my EV with the dungeon trumpet.
Do you not think it would have?
I do think so. I'm still, as much as I'm a big proponent of EV and I work for a charge point operator, hide under the desk, the train's still more convenient on this particular trip, and getting us very, very busy for charging at the minute.
Right. Can you tell us a bit more then about that charge point? As a charge point operator, what is the deal? There isn't this national infrastructure, is there? There were calls for that, I feel like decades ago, to be honest. Where are we at with it?
So I think currently we're in a bit of a land grab situation from a private CPO perspective. There's some good funding around to help local authorities to drive that transition, and I think that's a good thing. We find that positive. And there's a lot of private equity funding available as well for green infrastructure, so that's helpful. And I think we're seeing significant increases in the number of public charge points that are out there. I think there's some technology issues. There's a lot of first generation charge points out there. So as an example, the one that's not been working for the last 18 months, the potential is that's old technology that needs to be maintained or replaced. We had some of those challenges ourselves as well. And there's a real drive and move towards rapid and ultra rapid charging, which I think is where we're all excited, isn't it? Because the idea, you go into a forecourt, it takes you 2 minutes to fill up your car with diesel or petrol, and you get a coffee, you pay, you leave, end a conversation. Nobody wants to sit for 45 minutes to read the paper while you're on a bit of a commute. So that move to ultra rapid, I think, is where we see things going, where you're maybe taking 10 or 15 minutes to charge instead of it being 45 or worse, 7 hours.
7 hours.
Well, that's what you would do if you were sat in the office, isn't it? You would charge on an AC or a fast charger.
What are trucks using? What are lorries using? Maybe they can't be just using these standard chargers.
No, there's different technology for bus and truck, although it depends on the size of it. So, we've got some trials with waste collection, so bin lorries effectively. They're just using standard AC charging and charging overnight. But there are some more, and I'm sure Ruth will put me to shame with the real understanding of this, but there's some cleverer technology around the big sort of buses and larger trucks that help them to charge faster. But the technology is very new, really, in terms of, and it's not widely distributed. And that's, I guess, the place we need to focus next. The vehicle infrastructure, the cars, it's more sort of mainstream now.
Just before you pass that mic ball on, that you've done journeys in MA1, haven't you, and Gretna and all the rest of it. What's that like when you're in your car and thinking,
I did just what everybody else is
benefit. I told Charlie about wanting to set my vehicle on fire when I got home on a Friday night because I drove from Leeds to Glasgow and I made it, but 45 minutes and then drove away and lost almost all the charge that I had put into the car while I was sitting, and then got to Gretna and used one of the amazing, I think they're tritium chargers actually, but they were fantastic. In 15 minutes and I was off again and back up, But that's my car that's the problem, not the charging infrastructure. The car didn't hold the charge and the range on my car, 280 miles it says in the book, 160 in reality because I like the car hot and I want to sing loud.
That's the realities of the problem as well. Unfortunately, the charge all just together. So that, we talk about the superchargers, which are on the way. Have we got the ability to be building those here in the Northeast? If we're talking about, we've got this whole ecosystem of all these different skills, which are either on their way or they're going to be there. What's the status there?
Absolutely, we could be building those, yes. Nothing holding us back at all. I think the superchargers, the really fast chargers, are not necessarily the most efficient. You need liquid cooling in your lines and additional cooling systems on board your vehicle so that the vehicle can be able to accept that much power that quickly. So there are efficiency compromises on that as well. So I don't know whether that's really the answer. I think what we do need to do is think about how we could change our behaviours and our expectations and perhaps stop trying to replace the experience that we've had with petrol and diesel cars with an equivalent with electric. Because it shouldn't be the same, really. These are different technologies that need to be used in a different way. So opportunist charging, one of the things that I'm sort of enthusiastic about in the future is things like inductive charging systems. So anytime you stop your vehicle, you can be getting a trickle charge. You could even embed those in the roadway. So when you stopped at the traffic lights, you could be getting a trickle charge. And again, it's about having the right sort of billing systems and things so the cost for these things is shared equally. So there's all sorts of opportunities.
So there's a mixture here, it seems, across the board with everything we've talked about, a mixture of changes to government policy, which then might affect the infrastructure to help with the power or the buildings or the vehicles. But a major part of this is the public. And it's our perception and our behaviour. So if you were used to having a big 6-cylinder car that you probably didn't need to have, but it looks good and it sounds good, maybe you don't. Maybe you go for a little run around.
I think the way that the industry has worked, so for many, many decades now, the auto industry has competed for your business as a consumer with, better, bigger, faster cars with more and more features, more and more capability. We need to kind of wind back from that a little bit. We could build much more efficient cars, going back to the sort of performance standards that we had in the 80s, perhaps, that really weren't terrible. You could go for lightweight vehicles with, entirely good enough performance and bring that expectation right down. The trouble is market economics just doesn't let us get there as an industry. So I think if you can think about the choices that you make as a consumer, do you need the biggest, fanciest car? Or could you go for something smaller? Your Nissan Leafs and, those kinds of cars right now, they're very capable, they're very comfortable. I reckon they're a lot better than they were.
So that would be one quick change. Just to quickly bounce this ball around with the fact that if anybody here has feelings on, so if there's one thing that we could do right now, either as an organisation or as a person, that would help decarbonise, what would it be? Hands up, but just come up with something. You would say, give us one thing that you would do right now.
I would stop buying anything with batteries in it that didn't need batteries in it. So I would save all of the consumer electronics. You don't need batteries in your headphones. Save the batteries, save the chemicals for applications where we truly need them.
Okay. Anybody else? Suggestions? Throw the ball here to Matthew Lowston. What would be your suggestion here? Wait. Oh, wait 1 second. Throw that one. What?
Gonna stop eating meat.
Oh, stop eating meat. Is Professor Che Common here by any chance? He's over at the Biosphere and he has 3D tissues, that lab-grown meat, which is all about going green.
I'm vegetarian, but if you want to make a big difference, if people stop eating meat, it's massive.
Okay, what about changes to your business? I know. I know, is Steve Hayward from CGI. Where's Steve? Yeah. Steve, they are making difference. So CGI, big IT global company, is bothered about seagrass.
Yeah, so we do a pro bono piece of work with a charity called Project Seagrass. And the seagrass actually, like acre for acre, absorbs 35 times as much carbon as a rainforest. Notice the seagrass around the coast of the UK is declining. We've lost about 90% of our seagrass. The Project Seagrass uses CGI, space defence industry, to tap into European Space Centre satellites and tracks the seagrass beds across the UK so that we can start populating and growing it and seeding it. And that's becoming and the members of CGI actually go out and plant seed in these beds alongside the Project Seagrass team. And anyone can get involved in that, by the way, so it's a national guarantee. So if you want to go and look around the northeast coast and find where seagrass is, you can actually go onto the website of Project Seagrass and input data in there as to where these beds are, and then they can work out how we can actually use this to get more carbon out the air.
I love that. So you've just got, IT algorithms and all the stuff that are very hard to get to grips with, using space to save seagrass, to save the world.
Yep.
Steve Hayward, thank you very much for that one. And Claire Priestley, is Claire around? Is Claire here? Claire is at Harris 21. I wonder, she's just left. Because Harris 21, they're like an accounting firm. They do stuff. They're based in this building. They have been working on very simple decarbonisation programs, just even to become a paper-free office, to do things bit by bit, just to kind of take that level of responsibility. Anybody turning the thermostat down? Yep. Oh, yeah. Yep. Throw that ball. Have you done it? Have you done it?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Where?
It made a massive difference, actually.
Really?
Actually, so I used to live in a much warmer climate. I live in a much cooler climate.
Where did you used to live?
Well, just London. But right in the middle. It was noticeably colder when I picked up here. The thermostat was always at 23 when I bought my...
23?
I know. It's too hot. I know.
Oh, my goodness.
Now I'm 19 and I got used to it.
So you're looking at 19. How far should he be going?
Oh, we're down at 15.
15?
Oh.
Can anybody
Honest.
15? 14? Who's on 14? Farah? Really? Is it not freezing in your house?
Well, then against some weight.
You better get yourself a blanket.
It's over. Okay, we've said through this ball, right? So we're going from 23.
No, 19.
19. We get us all right over here. Okay, so you're going to go to, what do you need?
Electric blanket at night. 2 fleeces and fluffy socks.
Oh, incredible.
And a cat.
This is the reality.
This is the cold face of things. And across our building portfolio, we've printed off what our buildings are doing at night. And we can see some questionable practices at night. We're going through all of our buildings, making sure that the lights are off, the power's down.
Glad you clarified.
The heating in there. There's no kinky business.
Afraid you saw some questionable practices at night.
In terms of heating electricity. No kinky business at the council, I can assure you.
And there's our headline. We have the North East Times are here. Yeah, no kinky business at the council. Okay, on that note, brilliant. Thank you so much to everybody. And it is so great. Can we have a big round of applause here for... And to everybody who's been part of today. So we've had Rhys Dixon and Kirk Wallace. Please round of applause to everybody. As we said, it's been recorded. So we're going to do a little edit, a little turn up on our social pages. So please follow. We've got Helix pages here on LinkedIn and on Twitter and on Instagram, and we'll put all this stuff up. We also have some more dates for the diary. So here we go. First up, this is from Newcastle Helix Presents, the team here. June the 21st is something called Building Blocks. I'm afraid it's not for public invitation, but you really should know about it because it's part of
Tech Next Festival. So this is, Dynamo, the organisation. Yeah. And they're going to do a conference this year. But what they've done is they're pooling together all the resources from digital and tech. They're having Tech Next. So this is for the Northeast Digital Festival. It runs that week, 19th to the 23rd of June. Helix is getting involved, and we're doing it by opening the catalyst to about 200 kids, 9 and 10-year-olds who are just going to go wild. There's like a coding DJ, Sam Aaron, who is an old PhD student from Paul at Nick D. So it all goes circular. So he's going to blow their minds. Lego, the Altitude Foundation, who are connected to Scott Logic, and they're all going to be doing stuff. Then we go into the much talked about doggy debate in July, which will be outside here. So yes, there will be live dogs. Yes. There will also be puppies on videos. Yes. And the whole idea is that, of course, after the pandemic, everybody brought their pets into the office. And how does everybody feel about it? This building has pets in it. So if you want to come back and meet Lola the dog and so, oh yeah, she's the best. There's also Max, stiff competition. So we'll be getting involved in that. There's been a lot of interest in that. Then we move into, after the summer holidays, the Parent Trap, where we're looking at the costs of childcare and the implications for your life, as well as looking after older relatives, because a lot of people are in that squeeze. So that one is fantastic. So please get involved on that. Babies, welcome. Older people and their families, all welcome. And then we have another BrainFood. So this is lunchtime. What's age got to do with happiness? And that is going to be in conjunction with the National Innovation Centre for Aging, who told me that I'm basically in the pit of despair. It's like a unicorn. And so for my age, seemingly, not until you get to 80, are you going to be really happy with your life? So there you go. So we're going to get all of that. So much to come. We also, all of the BrainFoods, of course, are free to register. You're getting free food, as you know, free drink and conversation. So get involved. We'll get around the site. Can I say thank you as well to the rest of the team? So we've got Chris and John. Would like to say big thank you to our freelancers. We've got the wonderful Kenji Riley. There's here, Rory with the ball as well. Our Northeast suppliers and Olivia's Kitchen with all of their biodegradable cutlery that did everything that was recyclable. North Shore Coffee as well. Thank you to them. Our tremendous photographer, Thomas Jackson, who will be taking shots of you. And a Coco Media team who are around as well. And of course, amazing building manager, Tony, who's just been looking after us very, whistles. Looked after us. So thank you very much for coming today. It was another summer. So great to have you registered. Keep your eyes out. And if there is anything you need from any of us, you just reach out and we'll be there. We're not shy. So I'll see you at the coffee stand and take care. Bye-bye.